Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Nationwide, inflation is showing signs of slowing, but it sure doesn't feel like it in America's finest city. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. A recent study showed San Diego is among the worst in the country when it comes to inflation. KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen shows us why.
Everywhere around town, prices are higher than they were a year ago, from groceries to electricity to gas prices.
Prices here have been rising dramatically.
According to personal finance website Wallet Hub, San Diego has the fourth worst inflation rate in the nation. The company uses changes in the Consumer Price Index for its evaluation. CPI is a widely used measure of inflation. University of San Diego economics professor Alan Chin thinks Wallet Hub is pretty dead on.
We also have among the highest electricity rates in the country, and they're rising rapidly. And then also gas prices here tend to be a little bit higher than other places.
And that's driving up the cost of living here. But what's driving inflation in San Diego is the high cost of housing, including rent. That's something that Alexis and her boyfriend, Nathaniel Atkins, know full well. They're renting right now, but want to eventually buy a place of their own.
We're looking at the renters market right now, and I mean, one bedrooms are almost $2,000. So like thinking about buying a house is kind of hard when you can't even afford barely to float by and pay your rent.
According to the latest study by Construction Coverage, an industry trade news site, it costs nearly 114% more to buy than to rent in San Diego. Voltaire Lepe is a local realtor. He says the median price of a home in San Diego is $840,000, making the monthly mortgage payment around $6,200.
You have that option to buy $6,200 payment, or you can rent that same home for about $4,500. So the difference is $1,700 that a renter would be saving on a monthly basis.
Lepi says there isn't enough inventory in the market, driving up prices. He says in a normal market, inventory would be around 6,000 to 8,000 homes for sale. Currently, there are about 2,000 homes on the market. Jin says with a strong economy and high GDP growth, we might be able to see a reduction in inflation without going into a recession. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
A possible government shutdown is looming with two important deadlines fast approaching. As Cole Higgins reports, the Speaker of the House made a very important announcement today.
The clock is ticking for Congress to avoid a possible government shutdown. A major announcement made Friday by Speaker Mike Johnson, a top-line spending agreement that he made with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on Sunday remains in place.
Our top-line agreement remains. We are getting our next steps together, and we are working toward a robust appropriations process. So stay tuned for all of that to develop.
Two deadlines are quickly approaching Congress. The first on January 19th, funding for government spending, including military construction, Veterans Affairs, agriculture, housing and urban development, transportation and energy will run out. Anything not covered in the first deadline is covered through February 2nd.
When you're dealing with the budget bill, it's a negotiation. Nobody ever gets everything that they want.
I've spoken and received feedback this week from many members all across the Republican conference. That's a very important part of this.
The House is divided, with some Republicans threatening a shutdown over migrant border crossings.
The two biggest issues that face our nation right now, the two largest threats that face our nation right now, are the mounting debt at $34 trillion and the absolutely open southern border. They both are posing not just financial burdens, but national security threats.
We absolutely cannot have a government shutdown. I mean, we are in critical times, as we always are, but I think even more now, especially with the international situation.
Cole Higgins, KPBS News.
Crew members on board a Navy helicopter are being medically evaluated, and an investigation is underway after the helicopter crashed into the San Diego Bay. It happened during routine training involving an MH-60R Seahawk yesterday evening near Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Because of the nature of the training, safety boats were nearby. All 6 crew members were saved. It's still not clear what caused the crash. If you're traveling tonight, you can expect some headaches at the airport. According to FlightAware, more than 2,000 flights were canceled this morning. That is the highest number since July of last year. A winter storm pounding the Midwest is causing most of the cancellations, as well as the grounding of the 737 MAX 9 planes amid safety concerns.
I'm Ariella Scalise, and coming up tonight, we're talking about the colder conditions moving in, even some areas of frost throughout the valleys and deserts, and then some unsettled weather returning, cloudier, windier, and at times some showers before a drier, warmer pattern is on the way. A closer look is coming up.
The Jackie Robinson Family YMCA hosted the 39th Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Human Dignity Award Breakfast today. One of the recipients is Dr. Cecil Stepp. Before retiring, he served as president and CEO of the Urban League of San Diego County, director of community initiatives for the County Health and Human Services Department, and chief probation officer for the County of San Diego. When asked what he would like people to take away from the event, this is what he had to say.
What I really would like to see them walk away from is the idea we are stronger than most people believe in our community. We're capable, we're committed. There's nothing that stands beyond our ability of accomplishing whatever is necessary for the improvement of life in our community.
And Dr. Stepp will be celebrating his 91st birthday at the end of the month. This weekend marks the birthday of civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. across San Diego County. KPBS reporter Corey Suzuki says groups are gearing up for a week of volunteering.
Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a unique holiday. It's also designated as a federal day of service. In San Diego and across the country, there will be community events and volunteering opportunities next week, honoring the American civil rights leader. Joanne Fields is a founding organizer of Southeast San Diego's MLK Festival, which takes place Saturday next weekend. She says they'll have plenty of opportunities for volunteers to help out.
We'll need pacers. We will need cleanup the day before. We want to make sure it's a clean space, starting at the elementary school, along the parade route on Skyline Drive. Those are opportunities that we have for volunteering.
A lot of San Diego County residents say they do volunteer work. According to USD's Nonprofit Institute, almost half the county reported volunteering for a local nonprofit last year. Fields herself is a volunteer. She and several friends were inspired to organize the festival to celebrate Dr. King's fight for racial justice and bring people together across the San Diego region.
So I asked my friends, Sean and Mario, let's present this. Let's do something for the community. Because again, we have a namesake park after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but there was no celebration.
That celebration is now in its 14th year. Do you have other stories about volunteers who power your community or neighborhood? KPBS wants to hear from you. Fill out our survey at kpbs.org/volunteer. Corey Suzuki, KPBS News.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, the potential payoffs and risks of U.S. strikes against Houthi rebels in Yemen. That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Federal officials could soon be the target of another lawsuit linked to the region's persistent cross-border sewage problem. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson says the new lawsuit may lead to even more legal challenges.
San Diego Coastkeeper put the federal government on notice in late December. The environmental advocacy group filed an intent to sue the International Boundary and Water Commission for violating the sewage discharge permit at the federal government's South Bay sewage plant.
We have tried, along with many, many other groups and elected officials, to take a softer route to find funding, to encourage IBWC to work more quickly, but none of that thus far has worked.
The sewage infrastructure south of the border is broken, allowing billions of gallons of sewage-tainted water to flow into the United States. Those contaminated flows have overwhelmed the sewage capture and treatment facilities on this side of the border. That's a violation of the IBWC's discharge permit, which requires the plant to meet Clean Water Act standards.
Fecal coliform or enterococcus, kind of sewage bacteria indicators, have to be at a low enough level so that they don't threaten public health or degrade the environment. And the same with a whole range of things. In this case, the South Bay treatment plant has limits on a number of chemicals that are, because it treats sewage from Tijuana, that sewage also has toxic chemicals and hazardous substances in it.
The problem is not new, and the region's pollution regulators, the San Diego Water Quality Control Board, are working with the IBWC instead of punishing the federal agency.
The board is aware of the violations. The board has authority to take strong enforcement action, and to date, they have not done that. And so we are stepping in as citizens, as a clean water advocacy group, to take action to hold IBWC accountable.
Regional board officials have issued citations, but they have not fined the federal agency for violating terms of its discharge permit. The board's David Gibson says a Supreme Court decision in the early 1990s linked to Clean Water Act violations in Ohio rules that out.
In that, the Supreme Court ruled that unless Congress has specifically waived sovereign immunity applies under the Clean Water Act and other federal statutes. Federal immunity has not been waived for the International Boundary and Water Commission.
Regulators have given the federal agency until August to make much-needed repairs to the aging sewage treatment plant, but the $18 million due to be spent falls well short of the $300 million needed to rehabilitate the plant.
So while we cannot issue punitive fines, we can work with them and ensure that they understand the expectations under the Clean Water Act. We can turn to U.S. EPA for support, federal agency to federal agency, to make sure that the right things happen in the right order, bring the plant back into compliance.
For the last 10 years, we've had underinvestment in this plant. There hasn't been appropriate maintenance. There hasn't been appropriate operations, which is why we're in the debacle we are in right now.
Paloma Aguirre is at the end of her rope. Her town's beaches have been off limits to swimmers and surfers for well over 2 years. And that's brutal for a community that celebrates its connection to the ocean.
We're in the worst situation we've ever been. So we need to use every single tool available to us to make sure that the agencies that are in charge of protecting public health, that the agencies that are in charge of wastewater treatment, that the agencies that are in charge of protection of our environment, that they're all held accountable and responsible. Because right now we have a crisis that is the biggest public health and environmental crisis of our region, if not the nation.
Imperial Beach led the effort to sue the federal government 6 years ago after federal officials promised to do more to stop the polluted flows. But the flows have gotten worse. Aguirre is taking a hard look at canceling the settlement. Coastkeepers Philip Musigas says he won't settle because he wants to see
court-ordered federal court legal agreement that will hold IBWC accountable if they don't meet these deadlines.
The lawsuit could be filed in March. IBWC officials referred KPBS to the Department of Justice for comment. The DOJ declined. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
From wild winds to extreme snow, thunderstorm threats to dangerous cold, all 50 states are under some kind of weather alert today, according to the National Weather Service. But as 2024 gets off to a rocky start, NOAA is looking back at climate damage that was done in 2023, releasing its list of billion-dollar disasters. Gloria Pazmino has more.
Severe storms, floods, tropical cyclones, tornado outbreaks, a winter storm, a massive wildfire, an extreme heat wave. In all, NOAA tallied 28 separate natural disasters that each caused $1 billion in damage or more during 2023, the most in 1 year since the agency began keeping track in 1980.
The cumulative cost was $93 billion, and unfortunately it took 492 lives.
Of all the disasters to strike in 2023, it was last summer's heat wave and drought in the central and southern U.S. that was the most costly.
That was a $14.5 billion event. A lot of the damage was due to the agriculture, so crops, livestock, cost increase, but also the Mississippi River This was the second year in a row that the lower Mississippi River has had a low river flow, which reduces the amount of cargo that can go up and down the river.
It isn't just the physical damage to buildings and infrastructure that make these disasters so expensive. It's also lost time.
When businesses are shut down for weeks or months after a flood event or after a tornado outbreak, some of these different sector impacts are hidden, but we end up paying for them anyway.
And new federal data released Friday confirms earlier reports. 2023 was the world's hottest year on record by far.
A lot of people are looking at El Nino and viewing as 2024 could be kind of more of the same. So more heat, more extremes.
I'm Gloria Pasmino reporting.
The American Red Cross has declared an emergency shortage in supplies. The organization supplies about 40% of the nation's blood. Mandy Gaither has more on where we stand and how you can help.
A state of emergency. The American Red Cross says blood supplies are critically low across the U.S.
We don't particularly like declaring emergencies. We're only doing it because the need is that great.
The organization's medical director says an additional 8,000 blood donations are needed each week in January to keep up with hospital demand.
Without an increase in blood donation over the next couple of weeks, there won't be enough blood in hospital blood banks in order to allow doctors to respond to emergencies.
Low blood supplies impact surgeries and people with chronic diseases like sickle cell and cancer who require blood and platelet transfusions. The Red Cross says the number of people donating blood in the U.S. has fallen by about 40% over the last 2 decades, and winter weather and respiratory viruses could impact donor turnout in the weeks ahead, making the current shortage even worse. While all blood types are urgently needed, the Red Cross says they're especially in need of platelets and blood from Group O donors.
There's no way to get blood from anywhere besides a donor's arm, and that blood that you donate could be used to save the life of somebody who's been in a car accident. It could be used to help save a newborn baby, or it could be used to help get a cancer patient through their treatment.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
And anyone interested in donating blood can make an appointment by using the Red Cross Blood Donor app, visiting redcrossblood.org, or calling 1-800-RED-CROSS. A research team led by UC San Diego has sought to explain enormous clouds of gas surrounding galaxies. KPBS sci-tech reporter Thomas Fudge has more on what are called Orcs.
That comic-sounding acronym ORC stands for Odd Radio Circle. Radio in the name refers to its wavelength of light. UCSD astrophysics professor Allison Coyle led a research team that published their findings in the journal Nature. She says these things are about as big as you can imagine, hundreds of thousands of light years in diameter, bigger than galaxies. Coyle and her research team took on the challenge of explaining what they are and how they are formed. They believe shock waves from multiple exploding stars created a wind that pushed the gas we see into intergalactic space.
So it's from gas that we think exploded out of a galaxy a long time ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, that's been expanding out into intergalactic space, the region in between galaxies.
These orcs are in motion and they have an ever-expanding radius. The shock from exploding stars that creates them can happen when galaxies collide, just as our Milky Way galaxy is on a collision course with the Andromeda galaxy, but it's not something we have to worry about in our lifetimes. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
Petco Park is opening its gates to a new fan base tonight, hosting its first ever rodeo. The infield baseball diamond will become the arena for the San Diego Rodeo. Some of the world's top cowboys will compete over 3 days. Local businesses are setting up shop, including Brixton. Chase Kanowski from Brixton Encinitas says rodeo and hats go hand in hand.
It's very exciting. It's great for us. We're a hat company, so being a part of this is a really big treat for us. We are going to be burning hats, we're going to be shaping hats, we're going to be making custom one-of-one pieces for anybody that comes to attend, that wants to purchase any, and then honestly just having a good time.
Tickets are sold out for Saturday, but still available for tonight and the finals on Sunday. For all 3 days, MTS is increasing Green Line trolley service both before and after the event. Fans are encouraged to use the free park and ride lots throughout the trolley system. In 1996, San Diego artist and historic preservationist Elizabeth Scalise had an idea for a store, the likes of which San Diego had never seen. And that idea became reality in a place she called Architectural Salvage. Now, after nearly 30 years, Scalise is closing up shop. KPBS reporter John Carroll shows us around this unique store.
The tip-off that something quite out of the ordinary is happening here comes from the building itself. The pea green edifice at the corner of Kettner and Kalmia conjures iconic structures of yore, like Hollywood's Brown Derby restaurant. When you step inside, you quickly realize you've stepped into a menagerie of items rescued from a certain trip to the landfill, and that's when the name of this place starts to make perfect sense. Architectural Salvage.
When I opened, I really didn't know, it's not like there was a tested market or anything like that. I just knew that I loved finding these things and using them, and I thought other people would love that too.
This store proves the axiom that one person's junk is another person's treasure. Turns out, treasure for a lot of people. Just the thing they were looking for. Perhaps before they even knew what they were looking for.
And so I had people coming in to restore their old houses, and they needed these bits. So that became part of the process. And then I also had restaurants that wanted to use some cool materials, and people with their first apartment, and multi-million-dollar houses, and the whole gamut.
The whole gamut is a good descriptor for the merchandise you find at Architectural Salvage. There are things you might expect, like classic signage and doorknobs. There are lots and lots of doorknobs and the escutcheons that once surrounded them. Old doors, windows, I could go on, but you get the idea. After a look around, an obvious question comes to mind. How does Scalise decide what things belong here?
I guess I have this little inner voice, and when I see something and it speaks to me, I have a sense that it's going to speak to someone else.
That little inner voice has served Scalise well over the years. Business was brisk when we shot this story on Thursday, with customers new and those that have been coming here for years.
It's been great, and the pieces that we've purchased from here, just the accent it has made to our home. People
Really?
come in, where did you get this?
Like
Where'd
what
you
type
get
of
this?"
things did you get?
Well, so like these windows.
As the customer shared her finds, you could see the excitement, the passion Elizabeth Scalise still has for what she does. But the time has come to move on, to free herself from the confines of running this place. So now is the time to sell as much of this stuff as possible. But not everything is going. At least one item is staying, with Elizabeth. It's this upside-down canopy flower light from Egypt, as it turns out. She'll be putting that above her garden at her home.
It's been just the ride of my life. It's been so much fun, but I've got some other stuff in me, and I got to get out there. I'm going to go out and do some more things while I have a chance.
But there's still some time left. There's a big celebration sale this weekend, and she may stay open for a few weeks more. But whatever happens, her time with Architectural Salvage is drawing to a close. The end of a funky, eclectic era. Or is it? Elizabeth says she's open to having someone buy the business. New venture and cool old stuff, anyone? John Carroll, KPBS News.
And if you would like some more KPBS content, you can check out our new newsletter, North County Focus. It offers a quick recap of the big stories that are happening in North County, as well as a roundup of everything happening in our region. And you can sign up for that at the link that's shown right now on your screen, kpbs.org/North County Focus. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.